All right, here we go. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. Guy McPherson here. I have something in my throat. Hang on. Very excited to have as my guest today, Amelia Zachry. Amelia, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Guy. I'm so excited to be here to be able to have this conversation with you.
I appreciate that. You are welcome. So Amelia is a writer and an advocate for sexual assault survivors and those who suffer from mental illness. Her experience with sexual assault and the mental illness that followed has been one in secrecy, born of fear and shame. Going undiagnosed and untreated, she suffered in silence. Maladaptive behaviors that affected her life were just part of the norm for her. Once diagnosed, however, she learned about treatment and therapy and a methodology to regain her life. Now she's walking the journey in recovery, and she's taken to writing to break the silence. Her book, titled Enough, is a book about hope and inspiration and an homage to all those suffering in silence. Amelia, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
So before we get going here, share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you are now.
So I was born and raised in Malaysia, and I met my husband and we lived in Japan, and then we moved to Canada, and then right now I'm in Kentucky.
Okay. Is he in the service? Does he happen to be in the service?
No, he's
No,
not. He
he's
works
just
for a car manufacturer. So
traveling
yeah.
guy. Well, look, again, thank you for being here. You're obviously on a mission and you're very impassioned about what you do. So let's get going here. How the heck did you get here? Did you write this book? What transpired?
So I was sexually assaulted when I was 19 years old. And then I only sought treatment about 10 years later, about 7 years later. And I did not seek treatment or any kind of help was because of the stigma that was around it, right? I believed the stigma. I believed that it was my fault, that I should have made different choices, that I could have prevented it. And I believed all these lies that I had learned over the years. And then I went into therapy, and then the word rape was used. And it was kind of a shocker for me. I was like, what? Like, no, I was not. Like, I went out that night and I did these things, and like I made a mistake. It was a mistake. And it took a long while for me to understand and accept it as a violation. And I think only like 20 years later, which was about 18 years later, about 2 years ago, I thought about my daughters. I have two beautiful daughters. They're 8 and 6. And I realized that they are going to be young women.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to be faced with a world that was ugly, that could be ugly. A world that might not support them. And like wanted to write a story. I wanted to write a record of what had happened as a record for them to understand the courage and resilience that I had to get through it, and that it ran in their blood. And I wanted to write it for them. And then I realized that, hey, like there are a lot of women like me. And also I'm sorry, I back up a little bit. I forgot to say that when I was diagnosed with PTSD, when I started receiving treatment, I was diagnosed with PTSD. Shortly after, I was also diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And so living with these two conditions, I had to learn to live my life, right? So then I wanted to write this for my daughters, and I wanted them to know the story behind why our life was such. Number one, because I had a mental illness and we were coping with it and we were managing as a family. Two, that they would have the courage and resilience that it would take for them to overcome anything in life. And then when I started writing, I started reading a lot more. And then I found stories of other women who have gone through the same things that I have, other women who have had their struggles with bipolar. And I felt touched, and I felt that power come to me as I was reading the pages, understanding that someone else had the same experiences as I did.
Mm-hmm.
And it fired me up even more that I needed to write this story and I needed to get this out I needed to share with other women and other people who experience the same experiences that I've had. And so that's where Enough was born.
Amelia, thank you for sharing that. When this occurred, were you in Malaysia at the time?
Yes,
You
I
said at
was.
19 years old. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you said because of the stigma surrounding this, you didn't receive treatment. Um, did you tell anyone?
I did not.
Okay.
I suffered in silence because I believed that there would be repercussions for revealing what had happened, and that I was so shameful and humiliated by it that I thought that because I believed that I had done something wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that telling somebody else would just make me suffer even more. Well, actually, I didn't tell anybody, but I was in college then. But other college students knew what had happened. And then I got the whole shebang of victim blaming and victim shaming and all that. So I didn't even need to tell anybody for me to experience that.
Right. It just happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine, living with that and just having to suppress it, right? And just how did you manage during that time? What helped you, if anything?
I did not manage well. I had a lot of maladaptive behaviors, like you were reading before, and I was in promiscuity. I was drinking. I was missing out on work. I was just reckless, and I did all these things that when I met my husband, we started dating and we lived together very soon after. And he started seeing these behaviors, and he realized that this is not okay. Like this is not I hate to say this word normal, but this is not like not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
This wasn't healthy, this wasn't productive, this is something that needs to be addressed. And so he was the one who implored me to get professional help.
So at some point you shared with him what happened.
Yes, I did.
Okay. And he was the one that suggested or advised you to get help. And what did that look like when well, first of all, how did you respond when your husband said that?
I
Or
was mad.
you
I
were
was
mad.
mad. I said, I am not crazy. Again, with the stigma, right? This stigma is we are so conditioned to believe these things that
Mm-hmm.
I was angry that he even suggested that I needed professional help. I said like, oh, I was just having a hard time because difficult things have happened, and so I'm having a hard time, and it's not something that warrants a professional intervention, and I did not want it. And
So
so I
at
went
this
on
time,
to,
he didn't
sorry,
know the specifics of what happened.
he did.
He did. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so he believed that it was something that we couldn't handle on our own.
Okay.
So he believed that he didn't know what to do, and he tried. He tried to help me, and he didn't know what to do. And this is classic example of the difference between a therapist and talking to your friends or your loved ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is a huge difference because the therapist is skilled and trained in dealing with the conditions that I was suffering from. And so I was able to get tools to handle my thought processes, and I was able to grow. I
Mm-hmm.
think I've been in treatment for almost 12 years now. And so it looks very different when I started
Yeah.
to where I am today.
I mean, that's awesome. First of all, I think I commend your husband for saying something. It's not always easy to say something, and you for listening. And it's not always easy. Like you said, you're like, I don't need any help. But when you walk us through that initial reaching out, who did you reach out to, and what was it like when you did reach out to someone?
So we looked for a psychologist where we lived. We were in Japan at the time, and so there was a struggle because I needed to find an English speaking doctor. And so we found one who was an American guy. He practiced in Japan. And so I started seeing him, and for the first at least 3 sessions, I sat there silent. My husband was the one talking. He was in the session with me and talking for me and reporting all the things that had transpired, and I felt like sitting in a principal's office. I felt like they were talking about me without me. But the truth was that it was a revelation of events that needed to be addressed so that I could process them, right? And so I did not trust that. I did not trust the psychologist. I did not trust that my husband at the time, my boyfriend at the time, and the doctor had my best interest in mind. I was absolutely certain that I was going to be put in a hospital or an asylum of some sort. And so that's why I was very resistant. And I didn't want to get any treatment or go further with the treatment. But I think after about the 3rd session was when I kind of warmed up and kind of understood what he was saying, how he was saying that this isn't punishment. This is a way for us to understand what's going on, so I can give you the tools to live your life and even to experience life and even enjoy it. And he said the goal is that we get somewhere where you can enjoy life. And then I was hooked. I was like, okay, like I'm not enjoying life at this point in time. So if you say that there's a magic pill or a magic tool that can help me, I'm ready for it.
So it sounds like you lucked out in that you found a therapist who was actually good, because it's not always easy to find someone who not only is skilled and capable, but someone you mesh with, right?
Yes.
In addition to hearing that you could possibly actually enjoy life, can you share with us things that you started to do, or maybe perceptions that you started to shift in yourself that started to help you?
I think number one was the acceptance that there was a condition, there was a name for it, and there was something that needed to be addressed. I accepted it, acknowledged it. That was the turning point. Once I acknowledged that there was a problem and I needed to deal with it, then healing could begin.
Okay. And are you talking about the PTSD specifically?
PTSD and bipolar.
Okay. And bipolar. Okay.
Yeah.
So you heard what was going on, in a sense. He mentioned PTSD and you thought to yourself, okay, you accepted it.
Yeah.
And that
well,
was
after a while, I accepted it.
After a while, you accepted it. And so how did that help you? How did that acceptance help you?
I think once I accepted it, it was easy to see that the tools that were being given to me, we used a lot of CBT and ACT and cognitive behavioral therapy and acceptance
Commitment
therapy.
Yeah.
And I think like once I accepted it, I was able to then like look at the source and acknowledge these behaviors as symptoms. Acknowledge my behaviors as symptoms. And then I realized that, oh, this is why I was doing this thing. This is why I made those decisions. These are trauma responses. And so these are triggers. And I was able to identify those things, which made it possible for me to address them. Like now I'm going to change my thought process around this. I'm going to recognize the intrusive thoughts. I'm going to recognize the thinking errors, and I'm going to reframe this to make it a productive and useful thought.
It's exciting and inspiring to hear you go through this recitation of your own process and how you move through that. I mean, the way, Amelia, you said you were in the beginning of this when you didn't talk to anyone and you were just kind of oppressed by the stigma. And then to hear you say, you had this experience with this therapist who allowed you to see what life could be like. I mean, it's really inspiring to
Yeah.
hear that.
It was really like, it's when you're in the depths of like with PTSD and like with bipolar, I was depressed a lot. And that was my defining symptom. My depressive episodes were so deep and prolonged and terrible. It was intolerable that I realized that I didn't want this life. But what I didn't realize was I didn't want this life where I was depressed, where I was unable to manage my thoughts and behaviors, where I was unable to manage my life. That was the life that I didn't want. But there was a life that I had imagined it existed that I thought everybody else was living. The life where they were in charge and where I could be in charge and where I could take control of my life and I could enjoy my life and feel joy, feel happy. Like that's a strange feeling to I didn't realize I hadn't felt happy in so many years until very recently. I had this emotion come up in me and then I recognized it and I'm like, oh, I think I'm happy. Like this is what this is what they're talking about. This is what all these people are talking about when they say they're happy. But it's that bleak perspective on life that doesn't allow for healing. And so if we can just like kind of bypass that, step over it and kind of get over the threshold and get treatment and get help, I believe that it is so possible. A life that's different, that life that I thought was everybody else's was possible for myself.
Wow. Wow. So you're in therapy. How long had you been in therapy, or after how many years had you been in therapy when you had your first child?
When I had my first child, probably about 6 years.
Okay, so for a while.
Yeah.
You've been in therapy
Yeah.
for a while. Okay.
Yeah.
With that same therapist?
No.
Okay.
So we moved around a lot and like I understood exactly what you were saying about finding a therapist because I went through that looking for different therapists that match with me.
And obviously you found found
Yes,
some
I
that
did.
worked with you. Okay.
I did.
So Amelia, walk us through the process of how you came up with this idea or the need even to write this book.
Like I said earlier, mostly it was my daughter. But also, I think it had to do a lot with where I am in the healing process, where I am at in my healing journey. I find that I'm finally in a place where I'm distanced enough from the trauma, number one, and where I have a hold on bipolar. And I feel like I was ready and prepared to use my voice because it took a lot more than just writing, right? Because I was writing about these intimate stories of my life. It's a memoir of my trauma and my healing. And so a lot more was needed. And I'm glad that this was when a lot more was needed, like in terms of courage and the resilience and determination it took to finish the book and to see it through publishing. I think that I did it in a space where I was ready for it. I was able to do it because I was healed enough. I would never say that I'm entirely healed, I'm entirely cured. Well, number one, it's not curable, but but I believe that I'm in a space of healing where I'm in growth and I'm able to try new things and experience new experiences, go on adventures with myself and my endeavors.
You sound pretty amazing. I mean, you have a certain clarity and awareness, self-awareness about your process that, one hearing this can't help but say, my gosh, you've done a lot of work on yourself. And that I find that pretty inspiring. The process.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. When you started writing this book, you said, yeah, you wanted to write something for your daughters. And How did you begin the process of writing the book? Was it this, oh my gosh, I got to write this down because I want to share with my daughter or daughters, what I went through? What walk us through a little bit about your internal process.
My internal process, well, first of all, I wanted to get it out was the heaviest part, right? The heaviest part of the book is the sexual assault and how that happened and how that impacted me and my processing of it.
You
And so
wanted to
I
get
took
that out.
Yes, I wanted to get that out first.
Why?
And so I felt like it was the biggest burden I had been carrying with me all these years. I felt like I had been silenced for too long. And I just had the need to use my voice and like share this story because this was a big one.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed to get that out. So I started with that. And then I developed the stories and like other stories that I wanted to tell and all the experiences that I wanted to share. But then I guess I'm skipping I'm skipping the question and going one step further. I felt I was also processing my trauma on the pages.
Mm.
I was able to almost look at it from a third person view. It was no longer me. I was writing a character in the book. I was telling a story through a character in the book. It's weird because the character is me, but it was a distancing mechanism where I was able to create distance between me and the trauma and able to process it in a different way that I actually have not done before.
Oh.
I have not done successfully before. In therapy, I've tried exposure therapy and I've tried about writing the experience, but I've never been successful at going through with it. But writing this book, somehow, because of, I think, the determination to get the story out, I was able to do it and then process it and get healing out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like writing is a lot of times recommended as a therapeutic exercise, right?
Right.
And I think that I did that, and then I didn't realize how many more times I was going to have to re-experience that trauma during the publishing process. Because we have edits and developmental edits and copy edits and proofreading and the audiobook and the final print publishing and all these things. I read that book like I probably like at least 12 times. And every time I read it, I felt that I was processing the trauma better. And I felt that I was more accepting of the circumstance and that I was able to not be as triggered as I still am a little bit triggered, but I'm not as deeply triggered that I'm not giving really strong trauma responses whenever I'm experiencing it through reading it again or working through it again.
You talked about wanting your daughters to know about the strength involved in your process and the perseverance. And you also said you want them to know that type of strength and perseverance and courage, it's in their blood.
Yes.
Talk more about that.
I think as women, of my generation at least, I think we have grown up in a society that has boxed us up, put us in a neat little box that they can understand and that they can manipulate or that they can fit us into society. And that is changing, definitely changing a lot more. Obviously, like we have a female vice president, like things are changing. But I think growing up, I was put in a box, just like many other women like me have been put in a box and like are told that we are weak, a condition that we are weak and that our strengths are within a certain kind of limitation and that we are not allowed to grow or soar beyond that. And so how dare they tell us these things and alter the experience of life that we have as women. And so to me, that was very important that I have 2 children that I want them to grow up empowered and I want them to grow up with the power of being a woman what it means to be a woman and to have that courage and resilience and determination and perseverance and all these things that make us women, make us human, and that
Wow.
they have it. I want them to know that they have it.
What do you see as, I mean, you talked about the stigma being a major factor here, but when you speak with people, when you speak with women or men for that matter, who've gone through or are going through what you've experienced, what do you want them to know? What do you want them to hear? Maybe even to believe about themselves?
I think most importantly, my big message with my writing is that even though the path is dimly lit, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that we can get there. There is hope. All it takes is one step at a time, one foot in front of the other towards that light. And like, if you can't see it, then you just haven't got there yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's my big message when I write. I want people to have hope, have faith that there is a life that you imagined waiting for you.
It sounds like that initial therapist you saw in Japan was maybe that hope for you initially.
Definitely. And I guess not just the therapist and people around me who were supportive, who understood, who maybe didn't understand but wanted to be supportive.
Mm-hmm.
And I say this a lot because like for people who are supporting people who have PTSD or bipolar disorder, it is something that most people don't understand unless you have experienced it yourself. I think it's something that's difficult to understand. But having patience with your loved ones, showing support and love to your loved ones can help a long way. And I think like the therapist was a catalyst in my healing. Then I learned about how to talk about my illness. Then I reached out to other people. My mother-in-law, for instance, we were fast friends since my husband and I were dating. And she had no understanding or bearing on mental illness, but she was there for me saying like, I am here for you.
Wow.
Like, no matter what, I'm here for you. And there were several people like that along the way. And I think that was what helped me. I wasn't an island, and I wasn't like limited to the one person. I was able to reach out to the people around me in my life and receive support. And I think that's so important because people think that they don't have support most of the time.
Right.
They think they don't have support because they don't know how to reach out or what to say or how to reach out. And I think like with me, what's worked is I just kind of blurted it out. So I found out I have bipolar disorder. I'm having a hard time. I'm sorry if like I'm not the best friend at the moment, but I'm struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And then like I gave my friends the opportunity to either step in or step away. Right. But I think if you don't make that first move, then you're guaranteed not to have help.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm speaking with Amelia Zachry. Her book is called Enough. Where can people get the book?
So Enough, a memoir of mistakes, mania, and motherhood is available on Amazon and everywhere books are sold, Barnes and Noble, Indigo, anywhere books are sold.
Okay. And who is the book for?
The book is for anyone who has experience with sexual assault or bipolar disorder, or people who are supporting people who have that, or for people who are trying to understand the realities of the mind of people who are going through PTSD and bipolar disorder.
So what's next for you, Amelia? What are you hoping to do? I mean, you're obviously a really strong person and a passionate person and a perseverant person. What's next for you?
I think I'm going to keep writing. I'm going to stick to writing for now. And I do a little bit of advocacy work with my local NAMI chapter. And so I think I'm going to do that and continue advocating through my work.
Mm-hmm.
I blog regularly on ameliazachry.com.
Okay. We'll have that linked up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Is that the best way for people to get in contact with you?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Well, look, thank you so much for being here. Your daughters are growing up with an incredible mom. It's really inspiring to talk to someone like you. I mean, this what this podcast is about, you know, your process and what you went through and coming out of it and helping other people is a beautiful thing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your platform with me to get the message out. And I appreciate our conversation. It's been a good one. I hope our listeners receive something productive out of this.
Well, I'm pretty sure they will. All right, Amelia, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening and supporting this podcast. And if you'd like to join the hundreds of other therapists who are each month keeping up to date and informed and inspired about what's going on in the world of trauma, I'd love to invite you to head on over to the Trauma Therapist newsletter. That's the traumatherapistnewsletter.com.